Good evening, everyone. My name is Sharon Collins. I'm Professor of Environmental Studies at CU Boulder and a faculty associate of the Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Communities, your host for tonight's webinar. I'll also serve as the moderator for our panel discussion this evening. I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's webinar on the proposal for a Boulder County composting facility. This is an event hosted by the Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Communities. And I'd like to next introduce the director of the Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Communities, my colleague, Amanda Carrico, who's an associate professor in the Environmental Studies program. Amanda?
Thank you. Yes, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight and to welcome you here this evening for what I know and hope will be a productive and informative discussion around the proposal to build a composting facility in Boulder County. Before we start, I'd like to just take a few moments to introduce who we are as a Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Communities. We're a center that lives at CU Boulder, but we really, I think, are better described as a partnership involving university affiliates, including faculty, staff, and students, as well as organizations and engaged citizens in the Boulder community. And you can see some of our goals on the slide that's shown right now. Our overarching mission as a center is to foster research and collaboration that generate foundational knowledge that support the management of public lands in and around urban areas. But we also seek to create space for productive discourse around how that knowledge is used and how the lands around us and throughout Colorado are managed. And that's really the goal, I think, of this evening. We're hoping to create an opportunity for community members to gather, to engage with one another respectfully, but also to create some space to ask, pertinent and sometimes critical questions about land management topics that are affecting our community. And so we hope to build knowledge today. We hope that this knowledge includes information about the proposed plan, as well as information and knowledge about the multiple points of view that those of us that are affected by or involved in these land management decisions hold. If you go to the next slide, you can see our website, the link to our website, and I encourage you to check out and learn more about who we are, the work that we do, and if you're interested, how you could get involved. And I thank you again for being with us tonight. I especially want to thank Sharon Collins for organizing and moderating tonight's discussion, and a big heartfelt thank you to our panelists for their time and willingness to share their perspective on this topic, and to Aaron Freed, who is heavily involved in coordinating tonight's event and will be helping to moderate behind the scenes with me. So thank you for being here and enjoy the evening. Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks so much, Amanda. I really appreciate you being here as well. So our goal for tonight is really to learn about and to get your questions answered about the current proposal for a composting facility in Boulder County. So for the next 90 minutes during this webinar, we invite you to hear about, listen to, review the key details of the proposal, to be open to listening to and learning from each other, and to think about how we could come to a widely supported outcome. So this is not a public hearing. There's no decision that's going to be made at the end of this 90 minutes. This is an opportunity to learn and to discuss with each other the questions and concerns that have emerged as a result of this proposal. And so I expect there to be a lot of different perspectives. I don't expect that we will all agree with each other on every point. And I think that's healthy and I think that's productive. But I do ask that we treat each other with respect and to listen really carefully. Rather than just waiting to talk, I encourage you to really deeply listen to what others in this forum are saying. And so this is, as Amanda said, one of the key goals of the Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Communities is to offer opportunities for community members to gather and to talk about these issues that are so important to all of us. I think we all recognize that we live in an amazing place. We have an amazing access to the environment, and we all care deeply about this place that we call home. And so let's work together, let's listen to each other to try and think about how we could come to a widely supported outcome for this proposal. I'd like to turn now to introducing our panelists for this evening. And I've given them the very difficult task of asking them to in 3 minutes each, summarize their perspective and their expertise on this topic. And so I realize that is very short, but the plan is for us to have somewhere between 50 and 55 minutes to address and raise questions and comments from the audience. So we are on Zoom. We'll ask you to use the question and answer function on Zoom. So you should see at the bottom of your screen in the toolbar a Q&A icon. And so when you're ready, you can click on that and type your question or your comment or your concern into that. Amanda and Aaron are going to be working backstage for me to help consolidate and collate and bring those questions forward. And so then I will be asking those questions of the panelists during the question and answer period. But first, what we're going to do is go through each of these panelists. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. I will ask them when I introduce them to turn on their microphone and to turn on their audio, their video, excuse me, so that you can see them. And then when they are speaking, they'll have their video and their microphone on, obviously. So our first, I'll go through these all and then I'll go back and introduce Dan. So Dan Maich is the Compost Department Director for EcoCycle. Janice Wisman is the Real Estate Division Manager for Boulder County. Jace Driver is with the Materials Management Unit at the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment. Tracy Kessner is author of the Colorado's Compost Roadmap and Vice President of Business Operations at Vivid Water Technology in Longmont. Alan Lewis is a founding member of the Organic Land and Food Coalition in Boulder County and is a prior member of the Boulder County Food and Agriculture Policy Council. Chuck Wibby is the former owner of an environmental quality control standards company and a Daily Camera columnist. Natalie and Jason Condon are owners and operators of Isabel Farm in Lafayette. Jules Van Thun is owner and operator of Van Thun Farms in Longmont. And finally, Calla Rose Ostrander is a climate change and organic materials consultant with Phoenix Rising Resources and has been an advisor to the California Carbon Project. So what I'd like to do now is stop sharing my slides and ask Dan to begin his 3 minutes. And I'll give you a little bit of grace period, each of you. If you start to go much more than about 3.5, 4 minutes, I'm going to unmute my audio and ask you to wrap up. That way we'll have plenty of time for questions and comments from the audience. Thank you all so much for being here. I really look forward to our conversation this evening. So Dan.
Hi everybody, I'm Dan Maich. I am the Director of the Compost Department at EcoCycle. My connection to this project is that I see an opportunity to turn a major source of greenhouse gas emissions, the organic waste that we generate, into perhaps our most hopeful natural solution for drawing down carbon dioxide and restabilizing our climate. 30 to 40% of the municipal solid waste stream is compostable. That's food waste and yard waste. When landfilled, that's a major source of methane emissions. Methane is 84 times as destructive as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. If instead it becomes compost and is used to build soil, along with many other practices that build soil, it will do 3 important things. It will raise the organic matter content of the soil, produce more nutritious crops, and sequester carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere long-term into the soil. A local community-owned compost facility will allow us to maintain the highest value of this resource by composting it as close to the point of generation, which is all the communities in Boulder County, as possible. This is very important because our local agriculture is dominated by commodity crops. Global competition forces commodity farmers to minimize their costs, which makes the use of synthetic fertilizers an obvious choice for them. So if a farmer wants to improve soil, and they all do, this will have to happen on their own dime. The vision I propose to the county is that with the money we will save in avoided transportation costs, we can tweak the economic model of the compost facility and sell a portion of the compost to farmers at a cost that is similar to their cost to spread synthetic fertilizer. 2 things are paramount to achieve this. 1, make good, clean, high quality compost that farmers will want to use. 2, be a good neighbor, since Boulder County is densely populated. So I'm going to take just a moment to paint a picture of how organic waste is going to move through this site. A truck's going to arrive at the site, go over a scale, and it immediately goes into a building. door is closed on that building. There's negative aeration that does not allow air to escape from that building. The truck dumps its contents, the door opens, the truck leaves, door closes again. Then the materials are mixed together inside according to a recipe. Then the materials are taken outside to the building pile. Then that pile is covered and remains covered for the full 8-week primary composting cycle, at which point it is then transferred to a curing pile, and it should at that point smell good. It should have that nice forest, fresh earth smell. And so I think I'm about at 3 minutes, so I'm going to stop there.
Thanks so much, Dan. Really appreciate it. Janice Wisman.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janice Wisman. I'm the Real Estate Division Manager, not for Boulder County as a whole, but for Boulder County Parks and Open Space. I have more than 30 years of land conservation experience, and I've worked for Boulder County for almost 16 years. I plan to talk to you tonight about the history of the Rainbow Nursery property as an open space property. So first, I want to give you some history about conservation easements that are held by Boulder County. And just to give you a little context, Boulder County holds about 780 conservation easements, and about 250 of those were acquired through regulatory processes where landowners went to Boulder County to get approval for something and granted conservation easements in return. Boulder County has acquired 425 conservation easements through purchase using general fund dollars in the early days of the open space program and on properties outside the county boundary. And then in 1994, we began using open space sales and use tax dollars that became available to acquire open space. The county has also acquired about 110 conservation easements through donation or partial donation. And easements with that donation component are the only type of conservation easement that is required to be perpetual. Please know that the county only works with willing landowners. That's something we always like to share. And please also understand that sometimes landowners are initially only willing to sell conservation easements across over their property, but they are willing to give the county a right of first refusal to buy the property later, perhaps when they or a subsequent landowner is ready to sell. That's what happened with the Rainbow Nursery property, which was selected for this possible composting site after a careful review of many potential sites in the county. In 1994, Boulder County purchased a conservation easement and a first right to purchase over the Rainbow Nursery property. We used open space sales and use tax funds to buy those interests. And then in 2018, the county exercised its first right to purchase and bought the property, once again using open space sales and use tax funds. The conservation easement interest has merged back together with the fee interest in the property pursuant to common law and state law, because a single party can't both own the property and also hold an encumbrance over it. When the county commissioners approved the 2018 purchase, the commissioners said at that time that Rainbow Nursery was a property that should be considered in the future as a potential location for a zero waste site. And consideration of that property's suitability had not yet begun at the time we bought the property. The commissioners also acknowledged at that time that if the county ever approves a composting facility on the site, the county also needs to undergo a public process to consider whether to approve the change in use from open space to a compost facility. And if the commissioners allow that use, the county will reimburse the open space sales and use tax fund for the full property cost, which is about $750,000. And those funds would later be reinvested in new additional open space so that there would be no net loss of open space. And please understand that unless that change in use happens, the property will remain as open space. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Janice. Jay Stryver.
Hey everyone, I'm Jay Stryver with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. I work in the solid waste program, specifically the materials management unit. I am the compost lead for our program. And I will probably end up being the one permitting this facility if we get to that point. So I'm just going to run you through the permitting process as quickly as I can. There's a lot to it, and this is broad. We haven't actually received anything for Boulder County yet, so this is just kind of the general permitting process for a Class 3 composting facility. So A Class 3 composting facility is a facility that requires a certificate of designation. I'm just going to call that a CD. A CD is a local land use document that is actually issued by the local governing body, which in this case would be Boulder County, the county commissioners. Along with that application is required to be submitted an engineering design and operations plan. That effectively is the permit document for the state. That document, that whole package, that application, first goes to the county from the facility. I realize they're one and the same potentially here, but it first goes to the county. The county then refers it to the state for technical review. We do a technical review of that engineering design and operations plan. That plan is required to show us how that facility will meet the requirements of the solid waste regulations. That includes waste acceptance, processing procedures, how they're going to show us that there are no potential impacts to surface or groundwater, and how they're going to control, mitigate, and respond to any nuisance conditions, which includes odors. So once we complete our technical review of that document, we typically, towards the end of that review process, we'll put it out for a 30-day public comment period in the local newspaper. That public comment period is an opportunity for the public to provide comment on the engineering design and operations plan. And again, we're looking at that for compliance with the regulations. Once we're through that process, if we get to a point where the document can be approved, we will issue a recommendation of approval that will then go back to the county, to that local governing body. And the county has to hear that at a public hearing that has to be posted for at least 30 days. Then at that public hearing, we'll decide whether or not to issue a resolution to approve that facility certificate of designation. That's essentially the project, the process in a nutshell for the state. So I'll just leave that at that.
Thanks so much, Jace. Really appreciate that. Tracy Kestner.
Hi there, my name is Tracy Kestner, and I was the author of the Colorado Compost Roadmap back in 2017. One of the main questions I think probably is why compost? And I have to tell you that compost is referred to as black gold for good reason, actually, for several reasons. It increases water retention, it cools the soil, it increases drought resistance, which we desperately need these days. It decreases soil erosion. It sequesters carbon by increasing the growth of the plant matter above ground, which then traps sugars below ground, which is where part of the carbon offset comes from. It also increases biological diversity in soils. It reduces methane produced at landfills, which is where the vast majority of our food is going right now. It replaces chemical soil amendments, which in turn protects our natural waterways, and it turns waste materials into resources, and it also creates local jobs. And by the way, it also improves agricultural soils, which right now are actually fairly degraded on farmlands in Boulder County due to very typical non-regenerative soil management practices. In Boulder County, we love our local food and we love our local farmers. However, many of them can't actually afford to switch out their chemical fertilizers due to the expense of compost. It's currently produced about 50 miles away from where it's needed on the Front Range. And as Bob Yost of A1 Organics has said previously in interviews, it is cost prohibitive for him to haul it back to Boulder for agricultural application. By producing it in Boulder County at a facility, we can produce it at a price point that our local farmers can then afford. My research indicated that we would get the biggest bang for the Colorado compost carbon sequestration buck if we applied it across our 2.6 million acres of irrigated cropland. However, that's going to take a whole lot more compost than we produce in a year. It would, however, help us offset millions of metric tons of a carbon equivalent in the atmosphere, and would help then offset the 128 million metric tons of carbon that we produce across Colorado annually. So basically, we avoid greenhouse gas emissions from the millions of tons of organic material removed from the landfills. We repurpose tons of manure that currently are not being composted in that fashion. We eliminate the need for tons of synthetic fertilizers, and we improve our badly degraded agricultural soils. And one final thought to remember: fears about odors are valid. However, there are facilities just like this one that's proposed that have proven to overcome those issues. And that's what we're looking to do here in Colorado. Instead, I think for me, the key is focusing on what we can do by creating this facility, which is to help fight climate change, which is a clear and pressing issue. We can improve our agricultural soils, which we really need to do, increase our drought resistance, improve our air quality, and turn waste material into a desirable resource by composting it. Building that facility in Boulder County gets those resources where they're produced directly to where they're needed. And we can help set an example for all of Colorado.
Thank you, Tracy. Alan Lewis.
Hey, thank you very much. Alan Lewis, member of the Organic Land and Farming Coalition in Boulder County. As an entry point to my comments, 3 years ago, I organized a conference at Bard College in New York called Agriculture, the Human Microbiome and the Future of Health. And I worked with Tyrone Hayes, Dr. Ida McGowan, Dr. David Lewis of the EPA, Rodney Dietert of Gut Microbiome fame. And it became very clear at the conference that persistent chronic pollution is the cause of our complex chronic diseases that we're seeing uptick across the population. And of course, as a lay person, so to speak, in the middle of advanced, renowned PhDs, you learn what you don't know. You don't learn it, but you learn that you don't know it. So I need to give everyone a list of what we need to know about compost in Boulder County. We need to know that municipal waste and landscape trimmings contain and carry persistent toxic pesticides that make them unsuitable for agriculture. They contain persistent herbicides, including carcinogens, and in particular, clopyralid and aminopyralid, which are the persistent pesticides that almost wiped out organic agriculture around Durango when those organic farmers used the local municipal compost 5 years ago. It also stays in the soil for 3 years, so they were dead in the water. What else? Well, we need to know that farmers have refused to use compost in Boulder County containing these persistent pesticides. This was broadly discussed at the Food and Ag Policy Council with Dick Miller, Scott Miller, Steve Penner, Keith Bateman, and Fama Rasmussen, because they refused to take it because it was dirty and it caused more harm than good. We need to understand that antibiotics and other drugs given to cattle and hogs end up in and persist in manure and manure lagoons and will end up in this compost. We need to acknowledge that persistent toxins and pathogens in sewage sludge, AKA biosolids, heavy metals in compost become more available after composting. And here we're wanting to spread them on crops, forage, and garden produce in the county. Sludge also contains pharmaceuticals like antibiotics, Viagra, birth control, and psych drugs. They pass right through. And prions, fragments of proteins that are associated with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other diseases. Plus, remember that pathogens are measured at minute and legal amounts when the effluent in sludge leaves the facility, but not after they are in the pipes and containment ponds and compost where they have plenty of nutrients and warmth to continue to grow. We need to know that airborne organisms from biosolid processing are known to cause breathing, skin, and immunity problems. We need to know that the EPA acknowledges that residues in sewage sludge are such a significant public health hazard and have to be limited in their cumulative presence when applied to cropland. Not that it's enforced, but they've acknowledged it. And we need to know that liability falls on the citizens of Boulder County for environmental contamination and personal injury. There are several instances of class action lawsuits related to biosolids processing. We need to know that composting efforts have failed because metals, pathogens, pharmaceuticals, and residual persistent pesticides are not magically removed in this process. So where does this end up? For composting to be safe and effective, let alone to talk about it offsetting climate change, we need a systemic approach to eliminate the pesticides, heavy metals, and plastic debris in the municipal waste stream, the plastic cans in the alley, before it can be composted successfully. The farmers know this, the Food and Ag Policy Council know this, the commissioners know this, POSAC knows this, sustainability knows this. And finally, we need to dispose of sewage sludge away from animals, away from humans and crops, since it is a fetid mess and we cannot make it safe and somehow magically turn it into a climate solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Chuck Wibby.
Yes, good evening. My name is Chuck Wibby. I write a column for the Daily Camera that's published every other Sunday. I got involved in this project. I don't live anywhere near the project, and so I'm not somebody that's directly impacted by it. But I got involved in this project because it was brought to my attention from some people that were impacted by this. And the more I dug into this project, the more I discovered that the main problem with this project, in addition to the ones that Alan just outlined, are the fact that this facility, in an industrial scale facility, is being proposed to be built on open space land. In addition to that, the open space land, prior to being open space, had a perpetual conservation easement on it that prohibited any activities on it outside of agricultural activity. The building of an industrial scale composting facility on this piece of land is totally inappropriate. And the more I dug into this, the more I discovered that the county, in my opinion, was telling people things that were blatantly untrue about the facility. Not similar facilities that handle up to 100 million pounds of manure, biosolids, food waste, and agricultural waste in a given year in any place in the country, much less anywhere near an urban setting where it's been successfully demonstrated. The county initially, in part of their presentations, used the example of the Queensboro Bridge in New York City. The Queensboro Bridge is about a composting facility, handles 1 million pounds a year, 100-fold less than this proposed facility. And it is about to be shut down because of complaints from neighbors. They just got a 6-month extension, but that's it, it's moving. This facility, if it would perform to the level that the county touts it to perform to, then it could be built inside the city. It wouldn't have to be built way out on the eastern edge of the county where it's impacting the residents of Erie, impacting those people who had purchased their land near an area that was open space. This project will pollute the water. It'll create massive odor problems with it. And the whole process has not been transparent to this point. And I think that I represent the opinions of the vast majority of the citizens of Boulder County, that even though they don't object to composting, this facility is being built on open space, and that is the main objection that people have. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate your perspective. Are Natalie and Jason Condon here? Are you perhaps in the audience? And
yes, I'm here.
there you are.
Hi.
Great.
Natalie's
Hi,
not
Jason.
here, but I am. Hi.
Okay, wonderful. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Jason Condon. I'm a 5th-generation farmer here in Boulder County. My wife and I own Isabel Farm in Lafayette. We farm about 500 acres, almost totally organic, with the exception of just one field. And we run a farm store. We grow produce, grains, and forage. And we're not real close to this facility, but we're several miles away. So it's definitely in our neighborhood. You know, as an organic producer, when I first heard, you know, the county was interested in doing some composting, I thought, oh, that sounds great. You know, I think that really makes a lot of sense. But as I've started to look into this project, a lot of concerns or red flags are coming out, I'll say. So number one is, first and foremost, is biosolids. I feel like that's kind of getting just slipped in there as an afterthought, but the previous one of the previous speakers mentioned all the problems with biosolids, and I would echo those. But in addition to all the things that were brought up, it needs to be understood that it is absolutely prohibited to use any compost that has biosolids as an ingredient in any organic production. And so for me, when I look at that, that's a 3-year setback. So that means any land that this compost would be put on would be out of organic production for 4 years. In addition, anybody who's using producing food on a scale large enough to need a GAP certificate, which due to recent changes, anybody that produces over $5,000 worth of food products is required to be GAP certified, would be ineligible. So that's one concern. Another concern I have is just sort of this process. I find it very odd that, you know, there's only a small handful of farmers that are organic that grow on a scale, say, over 100 acres. And to my knowledge, none of them have been contacted about this. And most of my farmers that are not organic have also not been contacted about this. And that to me seems very concerning. I'm not sure how, it seems like the actual use of the component or the compost is some kind of afterthought, which makes me think that the priority is really more about dealing with biosolids. And I just, you know, if we're not actually incorporating the views of the farms, then how is this product actually going to serve a purpose? And finally, and I'll wrap it up because I know I'm getting low on time here, but we've gone through some major shifts in this county as far as agricultural thinking when it comes to sustainability. You know, for many years, county practices were to push animals off of farms. We did not want animals on farms. Now we're looking at that, thinking that that was probably a mistake. And now we're trying to bring animal production back onto many of our county and city farms. We've gone from organic being a top priority to organic being sort of an afterthought. Now we're sort of focusing on regenerative things. And, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, but I imagine that's going to change again. And the problem is this facility, I mean, we're talking about cutting down trees, paving it with concrete, and importing millions of tons or thousands of tons of hazardous material and putting it on our farms. And if we change our minds and in 10 years we decide maybe this is not the way to go, we can't just sort of change our minds. This is a very permanent type of step. And so in my mind, it just does not belong on open space. This to me seems like an industrial waste facility, and it needs to be done in an industrial setting with industrial checks and balances and that kind of thing. And I think we don't need to mask it as sort of good for farmers when really it seems clear that the priority is getting rid of waste. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Jason, thank you so much. And we'll turn now to Jules.
Okay, good evening. I'm Jules Van Tine Jr. I'm a third-generation family farmer. Our family has farmed 105 years in eastern Boulder County. I'm going into my 42nd year of farming in the county. The investment of CEs to preserve agricultural land has made my career possible and is near and dear to my heart for sentimental reasons. My first concern about the CEs is that they were supposed to protect farmland from industrial developments like this one. The county purchased a CE on this property in the 1990s. Since then, my family's farm and other surrounding farms were protected with CEs. These CEs say the easement is in perpetuity. But now perpetuity seems to be that farmland is protected for ag use for as long as politicians buy into the concept of ag land preservation. I am concerned that this will be only the first of protected farms that are at risk for industrial development, and that the protection afforded by CEs will be eroded. My second concern is as a water user and someone who is deeply involved in water usage and the water rights in the county. I am the president of the Boulder White Rock Ditch Company and also use the water in the Legged Ditch. Both of these ditch systems runs adjacent to the property and on the downhill side are vulnerable to surface and water contaminations from the site. Boulder Creek and Panama Reservoir both are close enough to be at risk from surface and groundwater contamination, as well as a number of other holding ponds between this property and Boulder Creek. There is also groundwater and wetlands on the lower part of the property that are at risk from groundwater contamination. There's no way that a facility like this can guarantee safety. My third concern is as a farmer. The county claims that this will be useful to local agriculture, but as far as I'm aware, the county has done no due diligence or opened any dialogue with local farmers about what is actually needed by local farmland. In talking to other farmers, I have heard a lot of questions and concerns, especially about the use of biosolids, which render the compost unusable for most food crops, especially organics, and remaining bits of plastic or other trash that doesn't compost down. Before I put amendments on my field, I like a soil test in the crops that I am planning to determine exact levels of nutrients that a crop needs. I may use composted manure from a dairy for some years, but even then, the manure is lab tested to analyze to ensure its useful amendment. My fourth concern is as a local landowner and a neighbor of this facility. This is an industrial facility going into a residential neighborhood. Not sure why I was invited to be part of this discussion and my neighbors were not. I'm a third generation farmer, but 4 generations of my family live within a mile of this proposed site. I'm concerned about the quality of life issues as well as potential health and safety impacts, the smells, the traffic, the rats, the flies, and also property values. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We have one final panelist, Keller Rose Ostrander.
Hello, everybody. I am living in rural Colorado right now, so please forgive me talking into my cell phone, and I will hopefully speak loud enough for you all to hear. My background is helping to scale up better soil health practices in agriculture for the last 6 years in California, Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. Prior to that, I worked in climate change policy for San Francisco and the city of Aspen. What I think I want to contribute to this conversation is just a big, deep breath. In all of my time, and now I work with cities and counties across the country, one of the things that I really want to bring to you all today is that a key portion to getting this right is the process. Now, you've heard a lot of folks on this call talk about different parts of the process or a lack of process. I want to really acknowledge the farmers who are on this panel for their time and thank them for giving their feedback. Hearing from the farming community as well as the neighbors is essential for any community who are wishing to design and build and execute composting facilities of all scales. Compost facilities can fall within a small scale community hub to an on-farm or on-dairy composting site to a commercial facility and many spaces in between. Colorado state regulations currently make mid-sized facilities very expensive folks to do. However, I think that there is an incredible opportunity in Boulder County to get this right. And to get this right, I really want to ask that all of you on this call, with your passion for this subject, one way or the other, commit to engaging in a process that's going to deliver results that are supportive of farmers and the land managers in the county, because if they don't, no one's going to use that product. It's not going to be a good product. And if it's not produced in ways that are good for the community that live around it, it's also not going to be good for the whole. That being said, this type of work requires a new way of doing things. So much so that I have had to learn, and I'm currently going through, a facilitation training in nonviolent communication. We are currently working across multiple silos in multiple agencies and across silos within the community. So my request to you all would be to continue your dedicated and passionate conversation and figure out a process to bring the impetus and the driving force behind this project, which is good, into a place where it can also be good for the community, those who are going to be near facilities or compost operations, and those who are going to be using that compost when it is finished. So thank you all so much. And I would just say again, remember that you all are incredibly well off, you have incredible strong values, and you are all engaged in a democratic process. And those are all the key ingredients for figuring out how to get it right. Also remember that we don't have a lot of horizontal processes in our democratic structures, either between agencies or between the public, that allow for ongoing conversation that really gets to hear from folks on the ground. So I would encourage you all to continue to ask for those conversations and to continue to be part of a process for figuring out what does work and how it can work and what might need to change in order to really make it work. So thank you all so much for having me, and thank you so much for your interest in this work and in Boulder County. I grew up on Niwot Road, right by Haystack Mountain. So the agricultural and conserved lands in the area are near and dear to my heart. I had open space behind my house and wandered it growing up. So I really appreciate everyone's protection and values of both the space and the agricultural producers who operate on that space. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. This has been a really wonderful introduction from all of you. A lot of rich material here that we can discuss. I'm going to start with a question from our participants, and I'm going to direct this one, at least at first, to Dan and Janice. So it's an overall question about the site selection process with some sub-questions. So I'm going to read through this, and then Dan and Janice would love to get your perspectives. And then if others want to jump in, that would be wonderful. So the question is, please fully describe the site selection process, giving details of other sites considered and how they were ranked. Question, why is this land that has such high conservation value being selected and not degraded land, industrial land, or agricultural land? Instead of one major industrial compost facility has the option of a few smaller composting operations on county open space agricultural lands been investigated. Can the county comment on why this site is being chosen when the county's own site selection report indicates that impact to citizens is a primary concern and there are other viable sites? And finally, in this question about site selection, there's plenty of space right next to the water treatment plant, and this would avoid hauling waste many miles. So Dan and Janice, could you, maybe Dan, you could start talking a little bit about the site selection process.
Okay, well, I was not directly involved in the site selection process. I can say that for 15 years, EcoCycle, sort of with Boulder County and independently, has been looking for a compost site within Boulder County. This site is the best site that we have seen, and we did not do a comprehensive survey. I don't know if Janice has familiarity beyond what I'll say here, but my understanding is that Boulder County Parks and Open Space and Boulder County Land Use did a survey of all the sites that have potential as a compost facility in Boulder County, and then they came up with top three options. And this is one, and so I did along with the Boulder County Resource Conservation Advisory Board tour all three sites. The Rainbow site is hands down the best site. So strictly from a perspective of, is this site suitable for meeting our needs for a compost facility, for central location for all the municipal waste haulers, central location for agriculture. It was on the spot for that. You know, in terms of, you know, I think I'm very much someone who I like a distributed system. I like composting as close to the point of generation as possible. I think that the regulations being what they are in Colorado, this is about as local as a compost facility can be. As Jace pointed out, as Jace walked us through, there's a lot to permitting a site. There's a lot of engineering to be done. And there's a minimum of about $100,000 of just the basic permitting. So to do that on a whole bunch of sites is difficult. I won't say it's prohibitive, but it drives you to think, okay, you know, can we get this done in one site but within the county? You know, that's the key, is it needs to be in the county. I don't know if Janice, if you want to say any more on that.
Happy to contribute a little bit. And just, I think everyone might guess by my title and the fact that I work for Parks and Open Space that I'm not a compost facility expert in any way, shape, or form. I also can affirm what Dan was saying about the site selection. Parks and Open Space was asked early on to consider and look at sites around the county, and then it became clear that we were not the right county department to do that. So a multi-department team put their needs together and said, this is the type of site that we're looking for. And they gave their list to our then land use department, now called Community Planning and Permitting. And they, that department produced a list of a couple of dozen at least properties to consider. And the county team went around and visited those sites and evaluated them from a multidisciplinary perspective. And all the other sites had fatal flaws except for the 3 that they then asked a consultant to consider. And I hope everyone knows that the county has a lot of FAQs about this site. If you go to bouldercounty.org and type in Rainbow Nursery, you can get to the FAQ page. And there is a report about those 3 sites linked on that page. And it indicates that the other 2 sites were unsuitable. And that's how Rainbow Nursery came to be the focus.
Thanks, Janice. We're going to have some other questions in a moment about the conservation easement, Janice, that I might toss back to you. But the next question has to do with the materials that would be accepted in the facility. It says, what materials would this facility accept, specifically in a level 3 facility? Can it only accept food waste, farm animal manure, and yard or landscaping trimmings? What dog waste, including the plastic bags, and human sludge waste? Animal carcasses? So I wonder if Dan or Tracy might know, or Jace even might know the answers to that question. About what materials would be accepted by this facility.
You know, so I think, you know, so Jace has not received an application yet. So you know, it remains to be seen. There's a lot of concern and talk about biosolids. So I'm going to quote the FAQ page that Janice just referenced. What will be composted at the facility? Biosolids are being discussed and may be accepted in the future, but they will not be accepted when the facility opens. The materials that we know are prioritized are municipal food waste, pre-consumer food waste, so you know, spent post-date food waste that is not sold or you know, spoiled. Any manure that we can attract to the site. Manure is very valuable for making compost. We want to attract manure. Wood waste, we generate a lot of wood waste in this county. We generated a lot of wood waste late last fall with all the fires, all the mitigation, all the fire mitigation projects that that mountain homeowners, that wood waste is aggregated at at 2 county facilities in Nederland and Allens Park. There's giant piles of wood waste. So rather than shipping that out of the county, we'd like to process that locally. So those are the key feedstocks, as we call them, that we'd like to focus on with this facility.
Tracy, can you add to that?
Sure. So according to the Colorado regs, a class 3 composting facility can only receive type 1 feedstocks. Those are agricultural crop residues, manure, untreated wood wastes, yard, paper, and green wastes. Biosolids are not on that list. The other thing to keep in mind is that a class 3 composting facility is limited in total volume to 50,000 cubic yards of feedstock in process. And the key to it being a class 3 facility is it can accept feedstocks from multiple generators. So for example, like Whole Foods, but also farmers and the like. And one thing I wanted to point out that might be of importance to note is that the amount that can be produced at this facility is planned to be 50,000 tons per year. 50,000 tons per year is the same as 100 million pounds. There are multiple facilities across the US that produce 50,000 tons of compost a year. The one that I was specifically thinking of that is a similar facility to this one is in Napa in California.
Hey, just jump in, Tracy. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I think you probably had a previous version of our regulation where we had class 3 was lower on the scale. We've kind of reversed how the numbering system works. So I think I saw his question in there. I'll just crush it out real quick on what the classes of compost facilities are. So the one that you just described would actually be a class 1 under our current regulation. No certificate of designation required. Prohibited from accepting certain materials. Built into the regulation. It's really essentially a green waste or a vegetative waste type of facility. No food waste at that facility either. Class 2 would be for a large manure processing facility that doesn't occur on an actual manure generation site. So somebody importing manure, that would just be manure and a vegetative waste as well. And then a class 3, which is the highest level, would be this facility. Class 3 can accept essentially anything under the sun that is a solid waste. I don't want to get into the definition of solid waste versus hazardous waste, but everything discussed, including biosolids, are all solid waste, not hazardous waste. Those things, just because a class 3 facility can accept those things under the regulation does not mean they can't accept them under their permit. So a big component of our permitting process is a waste characterization plan that specifically spells out the exact materials that are going to be accepted. So it doesn't necessarily mean that because a class 3 facility can take biosolids or industrial process waste or whatever, that they will accept them or that they're even allowed to accept them in their permit. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks, Jace. Chuck, did you want to add to this conversation? I saw you turned your video on for a moment.
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to just briefly add to it is that the current Boulder County site that answers questions about the composting facility does include the fact that in their project scope and their narrative that they are planning on accepting biosolids to it. And again, the examples that used to be cited on the Boulder County site as comparable facilities did not accept manure or biosolids. And that is a huge issue for this facility. It differentiates this facility from most other facilities in the country. And that combined with the scope of it makes it a complete unknown for exactly what the impact is going to be, especially for those people that live downwind from this facility in the city of Erie, which is only a mere 2.5 to 3 miles away. So I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you. Janice?
Thank you, Sharon. I think that's a misstatement. What I see on the site and what I understand is the county is considering biosolids, but has not decided that yet. I've also been told I could say that the county would be happy to take the biosolids off the table.
Alan, do you have a quick comment? And then I'd love to move on to the next question, just so
Yeah,
we
I
can
guess
get to as
my
many of these
judgment,
as
I mean,
possible.
The county is obligated to honor conservation easements too. I don't think anyone on the call should believe that the classification or agreements by the county for what they will and will not do and how they'll do it can be relied upon in the future.
We are going to have a question about the conservation easement in just a moment, which I will reach back out to you, Janice. Several questions have come in about the concern that this type of facility is known to lead to toxicity to groundwater, protected wetlands, and irrigation ditches. Specifically, smaller sites in New York have been unable to contain their pollution. Why do you think this facility can avoid this? And can the panel cite any specific genuine success stories using this type of facility near homes and schools? Please provide specific names for residents reference. And Cala Rose, I wonder if you could take that question given your experience working with communities in a number of states across the US.
I can answer it a little bit. I have not been involved in the design or the design selection of that facility. And my earlier point, I think one of the missteps here has been not including the community in that design process from the beginning and understanding the types of products the community needs and the types of facility that's going to work for the surrounding community that lives around it. So what I will say is that there are some great resources out there. One is called a community benefits agreement, and it's a process that was developed by the California chapter of composters. This is a U.S. chapter of the California chapter of the U.S. Composting Council. It's called a community benefits agreement. And it's a process by which a developer of a facility can engage the community and really understand the benefits that they need to have. Now, again, I wasn't involved in the design of this facility, so I'm not sure. I do know that the design they've chosen is completely covered and completely encased in cement. So I think that my understanding for that type of design is that the risk of runoff is virtually zero because you don't have water reaching active piles. I will say that in my estimates and seeing examples from around the country, I've seen some very successful examples of in-city composting operations that only accept clean streams of food waste and yard waste and that regularly test for heavy metals or any other types of chemicals, insecticides that may make it through the composting process. Many of these things are destroyed, heavy metals are not. And some of those chemicals, as Alan mentioned, are persistent, but there can be tests that are run to see if those products contain those at the end if they weren't destroyed. Would also really encourage the community to go upstream. We did a study in California where we looked at sewage sludge from 14 different wastewater treatment plants across the state, and the difference in the levels of persistent chemicals or compounds of emerging concern that are created when these things come together. And again, this is just for biosolids, and I just heard the county say they're willing to take biosolids off the table. But what I would say for all the activists on this call is you have to go upstream. While we saw a lot of these compounds getting out of the stream, we did not see some of them get destroyed. And those are the persistent ones, and those are the ones that have to be banned from products. So keep in mind that we can't answer everything with compost. We can go after things upstream, and we can deal with certain things downstream. And that's what I'd say about the facility and wanting to include the community in development.
Thank you. I want to get back to this question about the conservation easement, Janice, and I think you're the one who can shed some light on that for folks. And the question is, how can you destroy a perpetual conservation easement that is paid for by taxpayers and build a commercial project on it? Isn't this a violation of public trust?
Thank you for that question. And before I answer it, Sharon, I just want to make a quick comment about, in response to Cala Rosa's comment. The county did engage the communities extensively through the Resource Conservation Advisory Board, a public advisory committee, and at least 3 larger meetings, and also almost monthly in the subcommittee meetings. And our Resource Conservation Division managed that process. So to answer the question about the conservation easement, the county has a very deep and abiding commitment to conservation in Boulder County. That has lasted for the 45-year history of the Parks and Open Space Department and beyond. Our Parks and Open Space Advisory Committee was created in 1967. Every commission since then has been very supportive of the open space program and what we're trying to do to protect property in the county. And as you can imagine, we also, as a county, have to address other needs of the constituents, and this is one of them. And so when needs like this arise, the county has to try to figure out how to address that need. And sometimes it might be that a case like this would happen where a piece of open space property is the most suitable site for that. In the sales tax language that authorized the county to collect open space sales tax money to spend on open space, there's a disposition process that's outlined and described and intended for situations such as this. And it's an involved process. It involves a Parks and Open Space Advisory Committee meeting, special notice to the public, and a board meeting, and a 60-day waiting period in case the community wants to object to whatever the decision might be. And in this case, I also just want to note again that the county has not taken action on this. We've not undergone that process. This property still is open space. So even though that conservation easement interest merged when the county bought the property itself, it's still protected for open space at the moment and will continue to be so until the commissioners, if they decide to proceed with this project, do that. And it's my understanding that no decision has been made to proceed yet. They're considering whether they want to, and taking comment into account for that. And it's also my understanding that our webpage, where we have a lot of the FAQs answered and are taking input, that's a great place for people to ask questions. And then during the process, if it goes to a public process, that's a great place as well to bring up all of the concerns and questions that we're hearing tonight. So I hope that.
Can I just, yeah, thanks, Janice. Can I just follow up quickly? So the term open space here, obviously there are lots of different kinds of open space in Boulder County. I'm just curious, this is a former tree nursery, so it's not a ponderosa pine forest or a blue stem tall grass prairie. How does the writing of these easements differ in different kinds of open space?
That's a very good question. I'll see if I can answer it by describing the fact that the county back in the 60s and early 70s, the citizens and people that enjoyed Boulder County came together and actually asked the county to develop a comprehensive plan about what to do to protect all of the natural landmarks, the historical features, the scenic views, the important agricultural land, stream side and open stream corridors, all kinds of natural habitat, all of the different things that you might think of as open space. The picture behind me is actually a conservation easement property up on the Peak to Peak Highway. And so all of these conservation easements are written and tailored to the subject property because we have so many different types of property in the county that qualify as open space. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay.
Alan, did you want to contribute?
Yeah, just quickly, there's a May 1st, 2018 memo after the acquisition of Rainbow that states it's going to have a waste processing compost facility put on it. It was 30 months before the neighbors were notified of this and invited to a meeting. Can you justify that with your narrative about community engagement? Because the neighbors were quite surprised.
So I'm not sure what memo you're looking at that says May 1st.
2018. The acquisition.
Yes, so the property went before a board hearing on April 6th of 2018, and we bought it shortly after that. We were under a site analysis as a rule with the county, as a whole, where they were a different set of folks at the county were considering sites at the same time that we were considering and asking the commissioners whether they wanted to exercise their right to buy this property. So that May 1st memo is not something I'm directly familiar with. Happy to respond to that more directly if you'd like to send it to me.
I just recommend everyone on the call find that May 1st, 2018 memo, which specifically says we are acquiring this for a compost facility, because the community engagement only occurred after 30 months and $1 million of investment. And this is why there's so much animosity.
Thanks for your comments. I'm going to move to the next question about the type of compost. This came up a couple of times. Given the type of compost that would be generated from this facility, who would be the consumers of this compost, especially since the compost does not appear to be usable by organic farms in the area? And again, maybe Tracy or Dan, or and I'd love to hear from Jules or Jason about the kind of compost that you might be able to use on your farms. Dan, you want to start?
Sure. So every compost operator that I know of makes multiple compost products. So what a composter does is look at the feedstocks that are available and look at what end markets they want to prioritize. I know that Boulder County verbally has Boulder County staff has mentioned to me they would like to prioritize making sure that there is that one of those products be a compost that certified organic farmers can use. So that would not be a biosolids based compost. But there. Farmers, some farmers want to have a compost that has a little bit of a nutrient charge to it. Then there's a lot of uses that that need to be idiot proof, that are like, if you decide to put down a foot of compost, it's not going to kill anything. So that's a different, those are different products. So what specifically the products would be, what products would be prioritized here remains to be seen. But I'm a former organic farmer myself from Boulder County. I certainly would like to see a product that is usable by my organic farmer friends.
Thanks, Dan. Jules or Jason, would you like to jump in, and then Tracy maybe talk about some of the other uses these other products might have?
Hi, Jason here. Yeah, it's a little bit of a tough question because we've just sort of been engaged recently in the last couple of days, so I don't have a real clear answer. But there's a couple problems with it, which is the organic regulations are very clear on ingredients and biosolids. And I hear what Dan's saying. My concern though is any facility that handles sewage waste is a sewage waste facility. I mean, you're not going to convince my organic inspectors or my GAP certification inspectors that some of the compost on the site's okay if there's human sewage on the site. Beyond that, I have I have concerns with the compost because of the multiple sources. I find it very hard to believe that we're going to be able to track what these sources are that are coming from everywhere. And so that is a major concern for me. And then animal manure is a little bit of a concern for me because I think it's a little bit disingenuous to say we're going to bring in animal manure. The only farms that are going to be hauling it's not feasible for farms to haul manure to this site unless they're going to pay a significant amount. And even so, no local farms have manure in any kind of quantity to make up any significant portion of this agreement. So that leads to The only manure I could see feasibly being hauled here would be, CAFO type major feeding operations that have massive problems getting rid of manure. And again, while that's not as bad as, say, biosolids, it's still a major concern if we're bringing in something that most people in the country consider a hazard, and we're bringing it here. So that's one aspect of it. If you could get past those things, and I'm not saying we can't, but it seems questionable we can get past those things. I would not probably want to use this anyway on food just because of the questionable sources. But on our other crops, our forage crops, I wouldn't say we wouldn't use it, but the cost, generally speaking, is not just the hauling, it's the applying. And the amount of nutrient from that compost often makes applying it on a large scale not really feasible. It makes sense on a small scale on farm, but when you start talking about the quantities needed to, say, spread a 100-acre farm, that spreading, even if the compost is free, and even if it was hauled to me, it's still, the spreading cost would probably be prohibitive for the benefit. So I'm very skeptical that we're going to be able to really get rid of this. And I think, I wouldn't say it's an insurmountable problem, but I think it's something that we really need to get up front. Because if we have a whole business that's a taxpayer funded business and we don't have an end user, that seems poorly thought out. So, I guess if we had been involved earlier, we maybe might have some more intelligent, specific comments. But, at this point, that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I appreciate that. Tracy, I know you had investigated some other applications of compost, say in forests, or can you talk a little bit about what you know in that regard?
So the research that I had done, basically it was talking about putting compost on grasslands. That's where the research had started, actually, out in Marin County in California, to determine that it sequestered carbon in the soil. And so they were working on grasslands itself, and they discovered out there that not only did it help to infiltrate water into the soil, but it also helped to cool the soil. It increased the nutrient density within the plant matter itself that the cattle who were grazing on it were eating, and that's where they determined that it was sequestering, I believe, 1 metric ton for quarter-inch spread. Within Colorado, other locations would be for remediation of construction sites, the CDOT, so alongside the highways, any kind of a new build, they are currently required to put compost down as well. Regular homeowners like myself, I put compost on my lawn in the spring, and it's the first lawn to green up in the spring, and one of the last ones to go dim or straw color during the summer when it gets really hot, because it totally soaks up water. And that way I get to avoid putting chemical fertilizers on my lawn itself. So as for the farmers themselves for use, I also would totally recommend against biosolids. And I believe that the representative from Boulder said that they would take that off the shelf entirely, and that's the safest possible route for that. Within Boulder County itself, when we talk about animal manure, one of the things that I have found was the number of horse properties that are within Boulder County. They're producing a fair amount of manure every year, and right now they are having all of it hauled out someplace else because they can't even give it away, because their horses produce a lot of manure every day. And at that point there were over 15,000 horses. There's also much smaller farms that I wasn't tracking. I had tracked where the larger CAFO operations are. So that's that's what I know about that.
Great, thank you. A couple more questions about Boulder County's perspective. And Janice, I realize you're the Boulder County employee on the call. So I think you addressed this, but just want to ask it again in a different way. With clear community concern, is there any room from Boulder County's perspective to alter the plans, continue to have community deliberation and input? What is the time frame, and is there flexibility on this? Is that something that you could comment on?
I can comment slightly on it to refer back to the comment I made earlier that this project has not been scheduled for a public process yet. It's being considered for that, and when that is scheduled, we will let everyone know through the usual channels. I'm not going to be on point for that, so I don't know all of the details, but there will be plenty of opportunity for public input, and the county invites that. They really want to hear these kinds of things from our constituents. It's going to be managed through the community planning and permitting department, and they are very used to addressing all of these questions in their review of applications for whatever a landowner might want to do on their property. And they are well versed in making sure that all of these kinds of concerns are addressed.
Great, and that's probably the time frame is probably on or will be on the Boulder County website, I'm guessing.
Yes,
is that
I'm sure
where folks can get access to that information?
Yes,
That'd be
I'm sure it will
great.
be.
Okay, here's another question about the current situation. So the question is, why are we importing waste from other counties? Will this site be open to any city that wants to transport their waste? And I'm thinking, Dan, Janice, maybe you could answer that.
I actually don't know enough about this project to answer questions like that. Thank you.
Okay. Dan and Tracy, maybe? And Jace, I'm not sure if you have a sense of this as well.
You know, there's been, I've heard some talk about, you know, massive amounts of material coming from outside the county. This is intended to be a facility to manage our own organic waste locally. That doesn't mean that we will exclude materials that might be coming from over the county line, but this is a county facility to manage our county waste in the same way that we manage our recyclables at the Boulder County Recycling Center. So yeah, it's designed and scaled specifically for Boulder County's waste.
And Jace, is there anything in the permitting process that speaks to that question of where the waste comes from or how far away it comes from?
No, specific sources of waste would not be identified. Again, it would just be the specific types of waste. So it would be, you know, we'll take municipal yard waste, or we're going to have manure be one of the sources. Now they have to keep track of what they're bringing in. You know, I think somebody mentioned, you know, we don't really have a good idea what they're going to get. They'll know what they get, and they have to track it, and they have to report it to us every year, and we inspect on that. And it should be at least annually. And then there's always the complaint component too. If we get a complaint, that we would inspect the facility as well. So there's a lot of checks and balances on our end of things once a facility actually gets permitted about what they're bringing in, what they're sending out. They do have to test once for every 10,000 cubic yards that they produce. Just to make sure that it's a safe product. And if it's a good facility, usually they will do testing above and beyond what the regulatory requirements are to meet a minimum safety threshold too. So there's a lot of checks there. The areas where they come from, no, there's nothing in the plan that really has to state, you know, what their waste, you know, region or, you know, what their waste network is going to be.
Okay, and just in terms of the testing, are there regulations set by the EPA that govern the testing procedures and the outcomes?
Yeah, so the testing is all, actually the testing requirements are all driven from biosolids regulations, even though for facilities that don't take biosolids, yeah, the testing requirements are usually SW 846, which is an EPA testing methodology. that we require folks to show that they're testing in accordance with.
Okay. Chuck, did you want to add something? I saw you.
Yes, I realize
here.
that Dan doesn't speak for the county, but the county's own plans that they've been putting forward on this site and the size and the scope of the facility make it mandatory that the county would, to make it go according to how they planned it, would have to accept waste from haulers that come from outside the county. And in addition, you have to keep in mind is that we're already composting the waste in Boulder County. It goes to the facility in Keansburg. And a big argument for putting this facility inside Boulder County limits was to eliminate the 50-mile trip out to Keansburg for it. And part of that calculation involved the fact that some of these haulers were coming from outside the county and would be coming to the Boulder site, not going all the way out to Keansburg. So I think it's a little disingenuous to state that this facility is being designed strictly for Boulder County waste when it is clearly not being designed, sold, or justified on just Boulder County waste. We don't generate enough composting material to be able to make this facility go at the size that they are proposing.
Janice, did you have a comment there?
I did. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I just hit something funny on my screen.
It's okay.
I have been told that actually Chuck is right. This was designed as a regional facility because the ecosystems don't abide by political boundaries, and we have a need for composting in the area to match our county values for sustainability. And so the purpose here is really to serve the people in the area, and that's why it's being designed. I can tell you too, though, that the application that everyone has seen was the initial design for the project, and it is quite large, but the cost is also large. And so the county is reassessing what kind of facility this is going to be. And that's why it hasn't gone through a public process yet, because it's likely to be scaled downward and backwards. And we don't know yet what that will look like. But in answer to all the questions that people have about why hasn't there been public input yet, it's because we need something to start from, and they started from that, and then they got the input on the cost, and they're now taking another look. And the input, as I mentioned, is coming through those advisory committee inputs for the time being, and then there will be that public process later.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Jules, did you want to have a comment?
Yeah, a quick comment that we're talking about manure. We need manure for this facility. You know, in my career, you know, there was a time when there was a lot of dairies and there was feedlots in this county that could have provided that. Those are no longer here. And if that manure has to be coming in from an outside source, when you talk about other products being brought in, but if manure has to be come in, it has to probably be from a dairy that's 20 to 30 miles away. Most of these dairies run their own compost operations. So I don't know if they're willing to bring that into this facility or not, but if you need that much manure to make this thing work, you're looking at a long distance and freight to bring that in to make this operation work.
If I could just
Thank
add,
you.
hi Jules, nice to
Janice.
see you.
Sure.
It's not that the county needs manure for this facility to make it work. It's that there are other needs for somebody to have a place to go with their items that will become part of the compost. So it's.
But they got to be usable on the farms as well. It's got to be the right formulas. It might be good for a flower garden, but it may not be good for our farms.
And I don't. You're right. I don't know enough about that, but I know that they are considering what the right ratios are and what that should look like for the farmers.
Dan, did you want to?
A little concerned that, you know, the ag staff from Boulder County has not been able to reach out or give any information to the farmers what this is looking like or what it's going to entail. So that's another concern.
And if I could comment on that too, we are not able to provide much yet because we don't know what it's going to look like. Like I said, it's being redesigned. We would love to have the farmers' input, but we also haven't done the staff evaluation from the Parks and Open Space perspective for the ag lands that it would also serve, including those that you lease and others lease. And we also, as county staff and the commissioners, can't comment on what they think about this application and this idea, because the commissioners will be making a decision. And so we have to walk a very careful line there about providing information that will be informative to the commissioners making the decision and being informative to the public, et cetera, without taking a position.
And
Thanks.
yeah,
Dan, quick
Jules, I
comment?
just wanted to clarify that yeah, the manure I'm talking about is what Tracy referenced. What we have left is horse operations. There are two small haulers that are that specialty haulers that haul horse manure in the county. Talked to both of them in doing the survey prior to this facility plan, and so that, yeah, that's the manure that we have to work with, and that is the manure that I am hoping will come to this site.
Great. So I'm going to ask one more quick question, and then I think we have to wrap up. This is kind of on a different topic. It's about speaking to impacts on wildlife, raptor nesting, goose, turkey, and the removal of mature trees which sequester carbon. So the trees that are currently on the site and how their removal might influence wildlife. Alan?
Yeah, the world expert on pastured chicken is Reginaldo Marquez up in Minnesota. He reviewed the Rainbow Nursery site and said that he could put 3.5 units of chickens, which is 14,000 birds on there. And in the first year, with very little capital, be able to produce $800,000 in revenue. And that's by intercropping small grains that the birds favor over grain. Those birds are jungle birds that want the habitat in the trees, and there is a wetland there. And it would be a phenomenal carbon sink to have the chicken manure fertilizing these small grain sprouts and recycling all of that. And it's almost a turnkey business. So in terms of habitat and wildlife and highest best use, paving over paradise is the least worst use for that land. It could be incredibly valuable as is with the structures that are on there.
Any other comments on the wildlife issue?
Sharon, I can comment. We
Sure.
do have a natural resources planner who will evaluate the application with those questions in mind and provide very detailed comments about that so that any concerns can be addressed.
Thank you. We are just about at time, and I'd like to genuinely and deeply and sincerely thank our panel. Really wonderful opportunity to increase our awareness about this proposal, to learn more about some of the issues that are of concern to our community. And I just think it's been a really enlightening set of presentations and conversations and questions. So I thank you all in terms of both panelists and participants for being here tonight. I don't know if we will continue to have a forum for conversation through the Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Communities. We haven't even thought about that yet. But if it looks like that would be a productive way to continue to share information and answer questions, I think we would be very open to doing that. So thank you all again. Really appreciate all your involvement, and have a good evening. Thank you so much.